In the 1970s, British trucks had features you'll never see today. Cabs that tilted forward, brakes that whistled, trucks powered by gas turbines, semi-automatic gearboxes with only 2 pedals, fiberglass cabs designed for military use. These weren't mistakes, they were innovations. This is the story of how British engineers created a generation of trucks unlike anything else on the road. Feature 1. The Ergomatic tilt cab. In 1964, Leyland launched the Ergomatic cab, designed by Italian designer Michelotti. It was Europe's first mass-produced tilt cab. The American White 3000 had pioneered the concept in 1950, but the Ergomatic brought it to European markets. The tilting mechanism exposed the entire engine, giving mechanics complete access without removing the cab or panels. This was revolutionary. Leyland used the Ergomatic until 1981, 17 years of continuous production. AEC and Albion adopted it, making it the standard for British heavy trucks. The flat front created aerodynamic problems, reducing fuel economy by up to 15%. But operators didn't care about fuel costs, they cared about maintenance. The tilt cab let mechanics access engines in minutes without special tools. Drivers loved them. Fleet operators swore by them. Feature 2. The 2-pedal Beaver. In 1968, Leyland introduced the 2-pedal Beaver. This was a clutchless, semi-automatic transmission truck. It operated on only brake and accelerator pedals. The system used something called pneumocyclic technology. Air pressure controlled the gears automatically. Leyland engineers saw this as the future for trucks. They were wrong about trucks, but they were right about buses. The pneumocyclic gearbox became legendary in Leyland buses, like the Leopard and National. These buses ran the system successfully through the 1970s and early 1980s. In specialised heavy trucks like the Scamel Crusader, the pneumocyclic also thrived. But in standard trucks, the system had problems. It required electronic controls that did not exist in 1968. Without proper electronics, the gearbox was unreliable in daily commercial service. Operators complained. They went back to manual transmissions. By the early 1970s, the 2-pedal Beaver was phased out from mainstream trucks, but it never truly died. It simply found the niches where it worked best: buses and specialist heavy vehicles. Feature 3. The brake whistle. Bedford TK trucks had something that made them instantly recognisable. They had brake whistles. When the driver pressed the brake pedal, a high-pitched hissing noise filled the air. It was distinctive. It was loud. Drivers loved it. The whistle came from the Clayton Dewandre air brake system. It was not an intentional design feature on the spec sheet. It was a byproduct of the pneumatic dump valve releasing pressure, but drivers loved the distinctive sound anyway. In the 1970s, these whistles were everywhere on British roads. You could hear a Bedford TK before you saw it. The noise became iconic. Truck drivers remembered the sound forever. Modern trucks are silent when you brake them. The brake whistle died with the 1970s, but those who remember the sound never forget it. Ask any driver who worked in the 1970s and mention the brake whistle. They will smile. They will remember exactly what it sounded like. Feature 4. The wide cab Bedford TM Bedford launched the TM range in the mid-1970s to compete in the heavy European hauler market. The TM was different because it offered 2 cab widths. The narrow cab left the fender protruding from the side. The full-width cab had flush panels all the way down to the wheels. This gave operators a choice. The full-width option was unusual. Most truck manufacturers offered 1 cab width. Bedford offered 2. This gave customers flexibility. It also meant Bedford had to tool 2 different production lines. Most manufacturers would never invest in this. Bedford did. It showed how committed they were to customer choice, even if it cost more. Feature 5. Fiberglass cabs on British trucks. Fiberglass cabs were a uniquely British innovation. ERF pioneered glass-reinforced plastic, or GRP, construction with their LV series in the 1960s, creating lighter, more corrosion-resistant cabs. By 1974, ERF's B-series SP cab combined steel and plastic for maximum strength. Foden also adopted fiberglass construction, driven by military contracts with the British Ministry of Defence. Steel cabs bent under stress, rusted in damp conditions, and failed under impact. Fiberglass was stronger, lighter, and more durable. Foden used it on all civilian trucks too, radical for an industry where competitors like Leyland used steel to cut costs. The fiberglass absorbed shocks better than steel and resisted rust in coastal climates. It cost 20 to 30% more to produce, but ERF and Foden accepted the cost because quality and longevity mattered more than profit margins. Their trucks had exceptional lifespan compared to competitors. This innovation was one of British truck engineering's most distinctive contributions. Feature 6. Military four-wheel drive variants. The British Army needed trucks that could go where civilian trucks could not. Bedford designed the MK variant specifically for military requirements. It was four-wheel drive. It was specifically engineered for military use in rough terrain and challenging conditions. It sat between the Land Rover and the heavy transport trucks in the British Army logistics chain. The MK was rugged. It was powerful. It was designed for rough terrain, desert conditions, and mountain roads. This was radical for the 1970s truck industry. Most commercial trucks were rear-wheel drive only for cost reasons. Bedford created a commercial truck that could go off-road without sacrificing load capacity. It became a favourite for military operations worldwide. The MK served for decades across Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. It proved that British designers understood what soldiers needed from a truck. They understood that reliability mattered more than luxury. They understood that a truck needed to work in extreme conditions where civilian roads did not exist. Feature 7. The curbside window on Leyland Terrier. In the early 1970s, Leyland created the Terrier light to medium rigid truck. It was designed as a practical vehicle for urban and regional haulage. The cab had something unique, a small curbside window at the front. This was not a compromise. It was a purpose-designed feature engineered by designers who understood driver visibility. The window let the driver see the curb from the cab. This prevented accidents. It gave the driver better vision of the truck's footprint. Modern trucks lost this feature. They now have electronic cameras and mirrors. The Terrier solved the problem with a simple window. It was elegant engineering, simple, practical, effective. This small detail showed that 1970s British designers understood the real problems drivers faced every day on the road. Feature 8, Foden's custom build options. Most truck manufacturers offered limited configurations. You chose a cab style. You chose an engine. That was it. Foden did something different. They offered any paint colour. They offered any drivetrain combination. Want a custom split windscreen? Foden would build it. Want something experimental? Foden would try. In the 1970s, Foden was still an independent manufacturer. They competed directly with Leyland, ERF, and other British makers. They believed in serving customers, not mass production. They would build whatever a customer wanted within reasonable limits. Custom paint colours, custom engine options, custom suspension setups. This approach meant Foden could command premium prices. Operators were willing to pay more for a truck built exactly to their specifications. This philosophy of customization and customer focus defined Foden's identity throughout the 1970s. It was expensive, it was inefficient, but it created loyal customers who swore by Foden trucks. Feature 9. Battery platform workarounds. The Ergomatic cab tilt system had a flaw. The battery was mounted under the cab. To check the battery, you had to tilt the whole cab forward. This was tedious. Operators found a solution. They fabricated custom battery platforms mounted on the frame. These platforms were bolted to the offside of the truck. A spare wheel carrier combined with the battery platform. This let drivers check batteries without tilting the cab. It was a simple solution to a bad design. It showed how creative operators were when manufacturers made mistakes. Feature 10. Triple diaphragm brake chambers. Leyland Beaver. Freightliner models used advanced brake technology that was cutting edge for the era. Triple diaphragm chambers actuated the front wheel brakes with precision control. The design was complex and required expertise to maintain properly. The triple diaphragm system had to provide both normal braking power and emergency braking capability in one integrated unit. The secondary side of each triple diaphragm provided the emergency brake function that was becoming legally required. This was cutting-edge technology in 1966 when the system was introduced. It represented legal requirements for safety that were changing across Europe. Leyland engineers designed a system that did double duty simultaneously. It was clever engineering that solved a regulatory problem while improving safety. The system required air pressure at exactly the right levels. Too much pressure and the brakes locked up. Too little and they failed to stop the truck. Modern trucks use similar concepts, but electronics now control everything precisely. In the 1970s, it was pure pneumatic mechanics that depended on driver skill and truck maintenance. Feature 11. Pneumatic handbrake systems. The handbrake system on 1970s trucks was complex. Air pressure assisted the braking force, but the control mechanisms varied. Some trucks used a pull valve in the linkage. Others used lever mechanisms. Right-hand drive trucks operated differently from left-hand drive trucks. Leyland designed different systems for different markets. They did not use one global design. This complexity meant every truck was slightly different. Mechanics had to understand all the variations. It created maintenance headaches, but it also showed how seriously Leyland took regional requirements. Feature 12. Gas turbine experimental engines. In the late 1960s and 1970s, Leyland built experimental gas turbine trucks. This came from acquiring the Rover company in 1966. Rover had extensive gas turbine experience from military vehicles and aerospace projects. Leyland built a small number of prototype trucks with gas turbine engines. These prototypes mostly used the G-series or marathon-style cab, a high-datum shell designed for heavy-duty work. The most famous survivor is an Esso truck, preserved and restored, which is a marathon-style example of these experimental vehicles. It was one of a few experimental vehicles built for field trials in the early 1970s. The project never succeeded. Gas turbines were too expensive to manufacture. They consumed too much fuel in real-world conditions. They were not reliable enough for commercial service. But Leyland tried. These prototypes represented the future as Leyland saw it. The company believed gas turbines were the answer to emissions and efficiency. The technology just was not ready for the real world. By the mid-1970s, the gas turbine project was abandoned. Feature 13. Lightweight variants. Leyland offered multiple versions of the same model. The standard Octopus was heavily built. It was strong, but it was not competitive on payload. Leyland created a low-weight Octopus. Same design, lighter construction, better payload-to-weight ratio. Between the heavy Octopus and the lighter Retriever sat the legendary Hippo, a 6x4 that became famous worldwide for versatility and reliability. The Hippo was particularly successful in export markets. The Retriever was another variant. It was lighter than the Hippo, but more capable than smaller trucks. This approach let Leyland serve different market segments. An operator wanting maximum payload chose the lightweight version. Feature 14. Overseas custom variants. British truck makers were global in the 1960s and 1970s. Leyland Motors had assembly operations across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Instead of building entirely new trucks, they adapted core models like the Comet and Super Comet for local markets. These variations included different cabs, cooling systems, and chassis setups. India, through Ashok Leyland, became one of the largest producers of these localized designs. Feature 15. Drop-side bodies and distinctive designs. In the 1970s, drop-sides were common on British trucks. The ERF 44 had them. The Bedford TK had them. The drop-side let operators remove the sides for different cargo types. They were practical. They defined the era. A truck with drop sides could carry general cargo one day and pallets the next. These 15 features prove British engineering was once brilliant and different. The trucks are gone. The factories are closed. But somewhere on the road, if you listen carefully, you might still hear the echo of a brake whistle, proof that British trucks once roared.